There we go. Let's give this some hints. All right, welcome. So tonight we're going to talk about the seasons of a sport. This is a concept that I started looking at. Oh God, it was probably maybe 2013, 2014. Sean Phillips was on his podcast at the time talking about seasons of strength. And the basic concept was in the fallish time frame, he would do his cycling, and then he would do, kind of the bodybuilding in the winter, and just kind of rotate through things. So when I started looking at it, what felt natural was bodybuilding in the fall, strength training in the winter, because you're doing, you're kind of cooped up indoors. And then the spring, what I was doing is I was getting a lot more hikes in. So a lot of my conditioning kind of came in the spring, and then summer was just a lot of activity in general, mostly outside. So also a little bit of hypertrophy in the summer. So that's kind of where my start of this came from, about a decade ago. And then recently, Christian Thibaudeau has kind of brought it back, something that he discovered with somebody else, similar concept, only it was bodybuilding, powerlifting into like Olympic weightlifting into like sprint training. So one of the ways he likes to describe it is it's kind of like it's a rabbit to chase. We'll kind of get to that here in a minute. Just quick overview of Move, Fight, Recover, 4 coactive models. So that'll kind of come up here a little bit. And these are the things that we're trying to develop: is the physical, the psychological, technical, and tactical all at once, along with that baseline of health. The performance solution. So this is kind of where I came into it is I'm looking at the tactical world, and like, guys don't have competition. Like, it's really hard to do competition for infantry. Like, how do you compete without like doing a lot of expensive resources that military just typically doesn't have? So to me, the 80% solution was sports. So we've kind of talked about this before. We'll review it here in a little bit. So why team sports? So like I say, Christian Thibaudeau, he describes it as the rabbit to chase. So there's a certain point in, especially a man's life, where the physique and the gym metrics just don't matter anymore. It's at a certain point, you had to look a certain way to get validation. You had to lift a certain number to get validation. And there's a certain point where you just cross that and you're just kind of like, whatever. So I feel like a lot of, I would say, mid to senior level dudes have kind of gotten lost, and they're not really doing anything because they don't have that rabbit to chase. There's not really competition. The physique and the gym metrics just don't matter. And so something that I've looked at in my assessment is that the powerlifting, the Olympic lifting, tends to be by those that haven't played team sports at some point. And those are the people that typically don't move past the gym phase. Like, they just stay with powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting, CrossFit, whatever. And that's kind of their thing. But I suspect, and this is my theory, is that if you can get guys competitive in some type of sport again, some type of team sport, chances are they're probably going to be more incentivized to do things that are healthier. They're going to want to improve their performance. They're going to want to improve other things that are naturally going to make them healthier. Along with, it'll make them more capable when it comes to defending their family, performing their job, especially in our type of career fields. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. The other thing, obviously, you're going to get is teamwork and social. You get your reactivity and sports vision. And then I kind of pass that real quick, but as your fitness improves, and this is the big one. So I think a lot of older, say over 35, over 40, don't go into rec sports or any kind of things that are more advanced, whether it's MMA, jiu-jitsu like Mick does, is because they're afraid of injury, because their body's so decrepit and just kind of broken down and beat up. And so as your fitness improves in the gym, you start getting psychological safety because your physical state has changed. So this is where we get into the coactives, which allows you additional levels of sport. So as you get better at sport and fitness, etc., you kind of allow your body to play at a higher and higher level. So you might start off with just pickleball, And like that's as advanced as you want to get. It's what seniors do, cool. But at some point, next thing you know, you're playing full on rugby. So that's kind of the progression. So this was the original template that Christian Thibodeau came up with. I kind of renamed them. So in the fall, you're training like a power builder. You're working on strength and hypertrophy. Winter, training like an O lifter, doing your strength and power, your explosive lifts, chucking the med ball, some hypertrophy maintenance. Spring, you really want to train like a team sport athlete, looking at power, speed, agility, quickness, and strength maintenance. And then summer, training like a sprinter is kind of how he says it. And then energy systems is really what you're looking for there. So that's kind of the newer models, very similar to what I came up with about a decade ago. So this is kind of a sample template, looking at the first half of the year. In the fall, so going back to the different sports, the 80% solution. We like a small ball sport, which is your, for example, could be racquetball. A large ball sport, fall typically tends to match up with football, probably flag football for those of us a little bit older. And then hiking is your locomotion. Martial arts, this is where you could probably do a mix of jiu-jitsu and kickboxing. You're not sweaty as much as like you are in the summer. So you can start adding a little bit of jiu-jitsu. As you get in the winter, you can see below, you're doing primarily jiu-jitsu and this is just a technique. For the gains in the gym, you're looking at strength and hypertrophy. In the winter, hockey is your rotational sport. Basketball is your big ball sport. Skiing could be your locomotion. These are all just kind of examples. And then we get in the second half of the year, you got, let's say you want to play pickleball, maybe volleyball, and doing some sprints, short sprint work, agility work, that kind of thing. Summer, typical summer sports are playing rec softball, doing some co-ed soccer, run, hike, bike, swim, do everything outdoors. Now that it's kind of sweaty season, maybe you're shifting a little bit of the martial arts into maybe more kickboxing. Just as it's a little bit more less sweaty bodies sticking together. I know Mick doesn't care because that's his gig. And then you've got the gains are going to be energy system and your strength maintenance. So this is from the performance hierarchy. So this is kind of how you put all that together. And I got a whole video on that I just did a couple weeks back. But you look at the nutrition and health is first. Competition is your next, 1 to 2 hours per week. Once you have competed, and competition could be at any level, it doesn't have to be, a super serious tournament or anything. Now you want to look at the next 3 hours of your week at skill training and practice. After that, you're looking at your next 3 to 4 hours of your high volume strength training. The next 1 hour of weekly training is probably going to be high intensity conditioning. So now you're talking about your max heart rate runs, which we all love so much, which realistically isn't going to last an hour. And then zone 2 cardiac output, pretty much as often as desired and can be recovered from pain-free. So as long as you can recover from it, go ahead and do it. So if you want to hike, bike, swim, all that stuff, it's all good. This is just kind of a template of like what you could be doing in the gym to support these. So like the Strong Bastard 911, you could do strength essentials in the fall. The winter, hey, let's say you want to learn an Olympic list. The winter's probably your time to do it. Spring, you can start looking at some in-season triphasic, and then the summer, if you want to hit some GPP and some in-season hybrid, just focus on your sports. Totally up to you. So that's just kind of the templates. I'll open it up for questions for you guys, and I'll leave it right here on this slide. So what do you guys got? That's sweet. We got Manny on. You guys got any questions on the seasons of sport?
So when you I had a technical issue there and I popped out for part of it, but
oh good.
When you're building those seasons out,
mm-hmm.
When we talk about like combat athletes
yep.
Or tactical athletes, in some of those sports suggestions, are you basing that off of like what you view as good sports to support what the tactical athlete's going to need? operationally? I mean, obviously
So
BJJ and kickboxing, yeah, but like
yeah.
we talk about something like rugby or pickleball, is there event advantages for picking particular sport for combat athletes or tactical athletes?
Yeah, so and I'll move this to the performance 80% solution kind of format. So the way I assessed it, so I looked at all the skills that everybody in general needs athletically, and kind of the conclusion I came to is that you should have some type of small ball, stick, racket, paddle sport, because what that's going to do is force you to do a lot of rotation, a lot of rotational power. So whether
Mm-hmm.
you're driving a golf ball or playing pickleball, you're getting that rotation stuff that you're just almost never going to get in the gym unless it's like a very well programmed type of thing, and even then it's not as much power. The small ball sport, you're going to get a lot more of your conditioning is probably going to come from that. The other thing with the small ball sport too is you're looking at your hand-eye coordination. Things like ping pong.
Yeah.
If you're good at ping pong, you're probably going to have really good hand-eye coordination, which helps with your shooting and your ability to see and your ability to perceive things, and that kind of thing. And then obviously locomotion is just general human movement. Add more swims if that's in your job description. If not, probably looking at mostly just running, hiking, biking, just kind of general activity to the I don't know, stay active. And then the martial arts, I just generally recommend one grappling, one striking. I feel that typically tends to fill most of the gaps if you're doing that rotated throughout the year, if that makes sense.
Cool. Yeah, perfect.
Let's see. What else? All right, so I'll introduce you guys to kind of a concept me and Nick were talking about yesterday. Um, you're probably familiar with some of the French contrasts and triphasic, where you do the heavy lift and then you do some type of jump or plyo or med ball throw or something like that, and then you do another one and another. So something we were talking about is you could make a French contrast, and this is in the context of martial arts. I tend to see, so this is what I see at my UCA gym, is the guys that do gym stuff is typically bodybuilding. They don't do much outside of that. They may do some conditioning stuff. And if they're really into this stuff, they may do some type of strength training, but chances are it's probably going to be bodybuilding type strength training. So kind of what I looked at is if you're in this martial arts world, you're not getting much of the power, the speed, some of the other stuff that if you're not doing the seasons of the sport, you're probably going to miss out on. So something me and Mick were talking about is sport specific stuff. Typically you don't really need in the gym. A lot of people like to focus on it because it's good marketing, but very often you don't need it. But I think in the context of athletes that are not, they're already doing their sport, but they're not doing stuff in the gym, is you can actually make this work in like a group setting. So the example I use with him is that you could have the safety bar split squat as your first exercise, do that for 3-4 reps on each side, rest for 25 seconds. And then you go into like a single leg takedown. I would probably time that. I think if I was in a group, in fact, I would probably just time the split squat too, just make everything like 7-second sets. So they do 7 seconds per leg on the split squat, and then they do 25 seconds rest, and then they do 7 seconds of single leg takedowns, and then you would do say 7 seconds of a lighter dummy that you can throw around, like a decent lighter weight, and then after that just kind of do some rehab and accessory type movements. So that's a way to kind of make it a little bit more sports specific. So another example would be, maybe you do a trap bar deadlift and then you go into like a baseball swing or something like that, and then move into something a little bit more resisted, etc. So that's just kind of the concept we're talking back and forth.
One of the things, as I was thinking about that yesterday, and like putting it in the group setting, especially for like martial arts guys
Hmm.
is, so like, what do you think about for the strength component of that, where maybe equipment's a little bit limited,
Yep.
something like eccentric, a heavy eccentric phase of like a body weight um uh split squat, or
Hmm.
like a Bulgarian maybe,
Yep.
and do that. So you could do that in a big group setting with minimal weight,
Sure.
and then into your takedown or your sprawl or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, you could do something along those lines. The other alternative that I've used with groups is you just have them rotate. So maybe you have one person start off on the deadlift, they start the circuit, and then somebody else is like falling right behind them. 45 seconds later, whatever the timing is
Sure.
on it.
Yeah.
So you just have the timer set for 7 seconds and 25 seconds or whatever. It's a little bit harder because they have to do two legs on the split squat, but you could probably figure out some type of timing that would work where maybe you're just doing 10 seconds and then you do 10 seconds of rest or something. It's preferable to have a little bit longer rest, but
Right.
I've done it both ways. So that's another way that you can kind of manage the equipment. So maybe you only need one trap bar, and you've got, you also have that 2.5 minutes of rest after the circuit too. So you've got some that are just resting.
Right.
And they could be
Right.
doing skill, or like the other thing I was talking about with Mick is like that 2 minutes of rest might be your education time. Maybe like, hey, here's just discussing like the what you've just trained, why you trained it, that kind of thing. And that can kind of fill that time without it feeling like they're just kind of sitting around, which they need to get the nervous system recharged, but at least they're not sitting on their phone. They should be drinking water, kind of learning something at the same time.
Yeah, you could definitely use that time for like, what I kind of envisioned or thought about with this is something like, end of a technical training session, we do 4 rounds of this, and on that 2-minute break, we're reviewing stuff from the technical training session, right? Of,
Right.
hey, these are key points on your single leg, these are key points on your double leg, key points on your tie kick, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be great. It's just something to play with. I mean, you look at some of these sports and they just either they're not doing any training or they're missing a lot of the gaps of, the eccentric, the isometric, the power, the speed, all that other stuff that typically doesn't get trained if it's not coming out of like Men's Health or something.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I know I'm going to try and play around with this concept a little bit, but I know like in my classes, a lot of times when we do anything at the end of the class, I emphasize that, look, I'm not, this should not count as your training session. This is more like just a little conditioning burner, almost like it's a check. Like,
Yeah.
hey, if you can't do this well, then you need to be in the gym more doing some
Right.
other stuff.
Yep. Yeah. And I don't know if you read Cal's, God, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's like using, what was it? It was like speed in the warm up, or it was like the new paradigm of speed, I think is what it was. And basically he was using the concept was you do your speed work as the warm up, and then you just time it to match up to where you're starting to peak towards when you actually went to training, skill training itself. So you can do a lot of your speed work before the actual skill training, and that'll prime the nervous system. It optimizes everything kind of all at once. And if you got to train anything, speed's probably the most important. So maybe in jiu-jitsu it's not so much sprinting, which does help the nervous system, but there's not a lot of room in those gyms. So maybe it's like the oscillatories, doing the OC stuff. Might be something you can look at.
Yeah, the OC stuff I would say would be for both jiu-jitsu and kickboxing, where there's just not the space in most gyms to the OC stuff would be very useful as part of warm up.
Yep. Especially I think like, you think about like a really fast like dumbbell bench OC, it's going to prime kind of not directly the punching muscles, but it's going to kind of prime that pattern a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I mean, even like an OC push up could
Mm-hmm.
kind of get that effect going.
Yeah.
And prime the body.
Yep, for sure. You could, and I think if you did push-ups, you could do like band assisted or something like that, just kind of accelerate the speed a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then with some like really heavy dumbbells, so you can actually pull yourself into it. I've done that before.
Yeah. Nice. I'm gonna try and come up with a couple of rounds of that and send it to you and see what you think and experiment on some dudes with it.
Yeah, something to play with. I haven't really necessarily done it, but I was just sitting there thinking. I was listening to Christian Thibodeau, and he was talking about, there was a guy who used to do some of the sports specific stuff in French contrast, and that got me thinking. I'm like, man, you could just do a trap bar deadlift and then do like some hockey stuff and then do something else, and like, that would actually probably work. Like typically sports specific stuff's kind of like, it doesn't really drive enough. There's not enough intensity and not enough loading to really compare to the sport, but in a French contrast, because of the way the nervous system is kind of primed, that may work.
Yeah, for sure. I'll put some stuff together and have some of the guys try it and see what we think of it.
Yeah, see what happens.